Humanism. We carry on that tradition of free thought today, dedicated to promoting a free search for truth, meaning, and justice. Our web address is firstunitarian.org. I'm David Breeden, Senior Minister. Welcome. Good morning, everybody. I'm the Reverend Dr. David Breeden, the Senior Minister here, and I'm joined today by Rev. Jim Foti, Rev. Kelly Clement, our Music Director, Barb Brooks, and a host of FUS volunteers. Thank you very much. First Unitarian Society is a member congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations. We are an intentionally and radically inclusive congregational humanist community dedicated to promoting a brave and free search for purpose, meaning, and justice. Today's assembly is multi-platform, live in our assembly hall. See, now that's not canned. This is not canned for a change. Yay, thanks for the live audience. Yay, so we're live in our assembly hall. We're also online at Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and you can get us from the website there on our multi-platform. Go to firstunitarian.org. Thanks to Secular North and our amazing tech team for getting us and keeping us online and for innovating new ways to mix live and recorded content so that we could, for the last 20 months, keep going. If you are in the building today, please remain masked and honor social distancing. And after assembly, please leave the upper assembly hall. And as an incentive, there's coffee downstairs. Carrot, not a stick. There you go. But the bigger carrot, because it's not a vegetable, is it's Cinnamon Roll Sunday. Woo! I can smell them. Yeah, that smells good. So you can enjoy freshly baked cinnamon rolls in our lower assembly hall after assembly today. Buy a few to take home. Also, you can grab them and take them away if you're ready to leave. And online viewers, you can come after assembly to pick up cinnamon rolls. We will have people around at the Mount Curve entrance, and all the proceeds go to the minister's discretionary fund. Our session Welcome to FUS is at noon today in room 307 and also online with Rev. Kelly. If you're ready to learn more about FUS and our pathway to membership, plan to join the session, and we look forward to getting to know you and sharing a welcome. And you can either, a couple of times during the assembly today, if you're not here, you will be seeing this Zoom link come up. Also, you can email Kelly at firstunitarian.org, and we will be very happy to send that to you. Remember, the Pearson Social Justice Grant deadline is November 15th, which is tomorrow. Yep, so get that in, and you can find out more information about that in the at our website and also in the Friday email. Please note that after today's assembly, there will be no online coffee hour, but we hope you'll stay connected with the numerous online and in-person activities currently offered by FUS. Check again that Friday update to find out everything you need to know, or you can look on our calendar on our website. Our assembly theme this month is Holding History. Today, Rev. Jim will explore the benefits of updating our views of the past, and Rev. Kelly and Barb will offer music about truth, facts, and lies. We're glad you're here.
Master true. I'm asking you, sugar, would I lie to you?
Whoa, thanks, Rip Keller, for waking us up there. Each week when we gather, we light our chalice in memory of our Unitarian Universalist principles and First Unitarian Society aspirations. Today, we celebrate our second aspiration to pursue wisdom through reason, science, art, and the stories of civilizations. Thanks, Perry. And if you will join me in our congregational covenant, love is the spirit of this place, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Good morning. I'm Allison Wyeth, Director of Religious Education, and this morning I'm bringing to you our time for all ages. So gather around and get comfortable. Have you ever learned about something terrible that happened? Maybe in the news or in history class or on television? Maybe it happened to someone you know or to someone across the world you've never met. Our story today is about a young one named Sherman who saw something terrible and what he does with that experience. A Terrible Thing Happened by Margaret M. Holmes. Sherman Smith saw the most terrible thing. He was very upset. It really scared him. Sherman did not like feeling so afraid. He did not want to remember what happened. So Sherman decided not to think about the terrible thing he saw. Sherman thought that would make him feel better. At first, the plan seemed to work. Sherman woke up every morning. He brushed his teeth and went to school. Sherman played with his friends. He teased his sister, and he walked his dog. Everything seemed all right for a while. But something inside Sherman was starting to bother him. Sherman had to play more, run faster, and sing louder in order to forget the terrible thing he saw. Other things started happening to Sherman too. Sometimes he did not feel hungry. Sometimes his stomach hurt or his head hurt. Sometimes he felt sad, but he did not know why. Sometimes he felt nervous for no reason at all. Sometimes he did not sleep very well. And sometimes when he did sleep, he had very bad dreams. The bad dreams scared Sherman. All of these things made Sherman angry. It seemed like Sherman was angry all the time. He started getting into trouble at school. Sometimes he just felt so angry that he did mean things. Getting into trouble made Sherman feel really bad. Sherman didn't understand all his bad feelings. He felt confused. Sometimes parents help children figure out their feelings. Sometimes teachers or other grown-ups help. That is how Sherman met Ms. Maple. She listened while Sherman talked. They played while they talked. Sherman didn't feel mixed up when he talked to Ms. Maple. Once, when Sherman and Ms. Maple were coloring, she asked him to draw how he felt when he was angry. This seemed like a strange thing to draw, but Sherman did it. After that, Sherman drew lots of pictures of the pains in his stomach, the bad dreams he had, and of the fear he felt. And at last, pictures of the terrible thing he saw. Sherman and Ms. Maple talked about the pictures. He asked if the terrible thing he saw was his fault. Sherman said he worried a lot about that. No, Ms. Maple told him. It was not your fault. Sherman told Ms. Maple about the bad dreams and how scared he felt. It was all very hard to do. Ms. Maple was proud that Sherman was trying to talk about such hard things. Sherman found that it felt good to let his feelings out. Feeling good helped Sherman feel stronger. When Sherman felt stronger, he did not feel so angry. Nothing can change the terrible thing Sherman saw, but now he does not feel so mean. He is not so scared or worried. His stomach does not hurt as much, and the bad dreams hardly ever happen. Sherman Smith is feeling much better now. He just thought you would want to know. When we find out something that's difficult, an unpleasant truth about someone or something we thought we knew, it is a terrible thing. Something or someone we trusted to be a certain way has broken that trust. And you may, just like Sherman, do everything you can to try to avoid or forget that knowledge. But that way we know leads to stomach aches and being nervous and being angry. I hope you can learn from Sherman about a better way to handle unpleasant truths and terrible things. Talk about what actually happened and talk about your feelings about what happened with trusted people. I know you'll find many people like Ms. Maple around here when you do.
Since our founding in 1881, members and friends' support of First Unitarian Society has been essential for our ongoing mission. Our Sunday assemblies, community celebrations, cultural enrichment, and work in social justice come to you with the hard work of our dedicated staff and volunteers. Your contributions will help assure the continuing work of First Unitarian Society. Give now at PayPal, the Give Plus app, or firstunitarian.org/donate. Thank you. On Sundays, when we gather, we take a few moments to reflect on the joys, sorrows, and milestones of the human experience. We do this so that we stay in touch with our own humanity. We do this to remind ourselves of the value of a moment of stillness. And we do this so that no one among us is alone either in celebrating a joy or in facing the burdens of life. This morning, we send our good thoughts to several FUS members whose parents are facing life-threatening health challenges. Among them is McKenna Sepek, whose father has been having difficulty with COVID for about 3 weeks. Yesterday, he was showing improvement and had a successful Zoom call with family, and we celebrate those signs of progress. And we companion all our members as they navigate the ups and the downs of caregiving during this time. Also this morning, we send our good wishes to FUS member Gene Martinez, who is having significant surgery on his back to address a condition called spinal stenosis. You may remember that we mentioned this a few weeks ago, but the procedure was postponed at the last minute by the surgeon. The new date is tomorrow, and we hope that one sticks. Gene will be off of work for 4 to 6 weeks during the recovery period, and we'll keep you posted on any congregational care needs he and Anita may have during this time. We send our good wishes to Gene for a successful outcome and a full recovery. And we have a joy from FUS members Jenna and George Hutchinson. Their daughter Amy was married to Jonathan Rigotti on October 29th in a small COVID-safe celebration at Dillon Beach on the Northern California coast. And congratulations to all. If you are an FUS member and you would like to send a card to the Martinezes or the Hutchinsons, you can find their addresses in the FUS membership directory, or you can contact Rev Jim or the FUS office. We now take a moment of silence, and we think with gratitude of all those who are taking on the big and small challenges of life and who are living lives of justice, service, and compassion. Let us now share a moment of silence.
And we believe in life and in the strength of love, and we have found what need to be together. We have our hearts to give, we have our thoughts to receive, and we believe that sharing is an answer.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. How are we doing? We're doing well? All right, excellent. It's good to see everyone. This is really nice. The reading that I'm going to share with you is titled Anger, just one simple word, anger, which I think is very appropriate considering the present social and political climate that we're in. I also think it's appropriate personally. I find that I have succumbed to sympathy fatigue. And I'm finding it harder and harder to feel sorry for people who knowingly, willingly, and selfishly make poor decisions that affect the lives and well-being of others. And that's not where I want to go, because I find that my lack of sympathy will eventually turn to anger and then turn to apathy, which is worse. And so this reading, as you listen to this, was written with that person in mind, almost written to that person. The irony, though, is that I relate to it very well. So just kind of bear that in mind as I continue. So this is Anger by Lynn Unger. I get that you're mad. It's so much easier than the alternatives, like grief-stricken, or anxious, or bewildered. The world is not what you were promised. Strangers want things from you that you did not offer. And you are being asked to care about suffering and danger that could break your heart if you were to let it in. You are holding on to your freedom. You are clinging on to your rights in these stormy seas. No one is going to take your place on this all too small raft. Your rage will protect you. It'll be the oar that beats off the invader. It will be both the propulsion and rudder, will be your faith and your salvation as it carries you further and further out to sea. Thank you.
So there's something about kids that makes them want to build a fort. I think it's almost genetic, and I know I've experienced it. It often starts at a young age with pillow forts made out of whatever cushions and blankets are available to create a cozy space away from the rest of the family. Then maybe when you're a little older, you level up and go outside and build a snow fort. A snow fort can be cozy too, but it may also have a strategic purpose if flinging snowballs is in the offing. And then depending on your climbing skills, you might graduate to a tree fort. I'm not totally clear on the difference between a tree fort and a tree house, but I think it's a matter of who's invited. So forts might capture one's imagination at an early age, and those of us fortunate enough to travel might get to go visit some actual forts to fuel our interest. I was pretty little at the time, but I have a very clear memory of visiting the big fort on Mackinac Island and taking in the sweeping views of Lake Huron. When I was in college, I was invited to visit Puerto Rico, where I was enraptured by the architecture of El Morro, a massive pile of stone that has been part of San Juan's history for nearly 500 years. And for families who really want to mix it up, there's a Civil War era historic site in Tennessee called Fort Pillow. It's named after an actual Confederate general, and it's just one of hundreds of forts across the American landscape. So if your childhood has some parallels to mine, maybe you grew up visiting forts and making forts and thinking of them as protective and benign and scenic. I went through life that way for quite some time. I first visited Fort Snelling the same year I went to El Morro. I went in with a tourist's perspective and took in the period costumes and the well-restored rooms. It wasn't until some years later that my view got complexified, when I better understood Fort Snelling's history in the colonizing of Minnesota. This picture is of a concentration camp for Dakota people in the 1860s at our Fort Snelling. Forts were protective, all right, but they were quite selective in whom they protected, and they were dismal places for everyone else. More recently, I was struck by a tweet from a website called the Decolonial Atlas, which has a very interesting collection of non-traditional maps. The website offered this map showing the locations of hundreds of forts across North America, and it made this comment. Settlers live on a continent full of places named fort, but refuse to admit that it's stolen land. Like, what do you think all those forts were for? The answer is, of course, that conquering, killing, and confiscating were exactly what those forts were for. That's hardly the benign view I grew up with, but it's a more well-rounded and fully honest perspective. And I'm grateful to have this more complex, more complete view of history. But as we are seeing nationwide, not everyone responds to a revised historical outlook with gratitude, or even a matter-of-fact acceptance. Reality can be upsetting. And right now, around the country, there are many new laws going into effect to ban public schools from teaching ideas that can cause anyone to, quote, feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress because of their race or sex. Some of the folks promoting these laws, which are on the books in places like Iowa and several southern states, the folks promoting these laws claim to be for small government, but they've taken to legislating which emotions are allowable in history class. Our assembly theme this month at FUS is Holding History, and the topic could hardly be better timed. History is a hot potato right now, hard for many to hold, and there's an organized assault on some of the facts that make up the true stories of our country. And our humanist and Unitarian Universalist values around facts and reason and inclusion call on us to pay attention on behalf of history and the many different kinds of people who created it. How did we get here? Well, these troubled waters have a lot of tributaries. A main factor is that millions of Americans received truly terrible educations in American history. No, not just boring history educations, like the one famously depicted in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but instead egregiously inaccurate ones. Would history lie to you? Would the history books lie to you? Yes, they would, and they did. We are discovering more and more misrepresentations all the time. This illustration is a little difficult to look at. It's from the official State of Virginia history textbook from 1957. It shows a well-dressed man of African heritage and his family being greeted with a handshake on the deck of a ship by his new owner, by his enslaver. As anyone with a real history education can tell you, not a thing about this is realistic. And the wordings in the book are equally outrageous, with sentences like this one. A feeling of strong affection existed between master and slaves in a majority of Virginia homes. The book says that many enslaved people were taught to read and write, when the reality was that such teaching was illegal. And the book describes plantation life as happy and prosperous for all. The book was written by politicians in the years after public schools and the military were officially desegregated, moves that freaked out white racists. This book's narratives are utterly farcical, and yet this was the official Virginia history book for more than 20 years. The lasting damage to the truth and to history is astounding, and it helps explain the huge gaps in racial understanding that we have today. Now, of course, up here in the far north, it's tempting to get smug and roll our eyes about what was happening down south in the late Jim Crow era. But disinformation and whitewashing haven't been limited to a particular region. For example, I and millions of other American kids grew up on Schoolhouse Rock, the peppy little Saturday morning cartoons that offered lessons about grammar, science, and American history. Gen Xers and probably their parents can still sing these catchy ditties today. Schoolhouse Rock got the equivalent of billions of views in its day, and it helped countless kids learn their conjunctions and adverbs and math. But a few of these cartoons did not do us or history any favors. The lyrics to one cartoon, called Melting Pot, tell the story of American diversity entirely from the perspective of European immigration, which had peaked 60 years earlier. Unmentioned are the millions of people who already lived on the continent. Unmentioned are the millions more stolen from Africa. Unmentioned are the millions of immigrants who didn't come from Europe. And the melting pot ideal of assimilation, the idea that immigrants from around the world come here and blend into a single European-based culture, this idea has long been out of favor. It's been replaced with newer metaphors like a mosaic or even a salad bowl. But the idea of melting into an easy-to-digest sameness was reinforced for so long that it's hard to dislodge. A second cartoon, called Elbow Room, celebrates manifest destiny, the idea that whites were destined by God to take over the continent. This cheery song makes reference to trampling down the wilderness and repeats the motto, "In God we trust." And the whole cartoon would leave a kid to think that the land was devoid of humans prior to colonization. A blank slate, just waiting for new arrivals in need of more elbow room. I don't mean to beat up on Schoolhouse Rock, because overall, its cartoons did a lot of good, and even its creators later acknowledged that they would have left out the idea of manifest destiny. But as they were making Elbow Room, a good question for someone to ask might have been, what do you think all those forts were for? So we have all these visions of American history that are comforting and comfortable to a shrinking majority that will soon be a minority. And these ideas are deeply ingrained in the national psyche. Lots of kids who saw Schoolhouse Rock went on to study very little additional American history, or science, or grammar for that matter. And if they did pursue more history, they may well have gotten more of the same narrow perspective. So their personal outlooks never got revised. These comforting perspectives can lead to a belief in a kind of baked-in benevolence. And people get very upset when you tell them that the world is not as benign as they have believed it to be. Among scholars who study white supremacy culture, such as Tema Okun, this is known as the right to comfort. The assumption that those with power have a right to emotional and psychological comfort. As Okun puts it, this assumption supports the tendency to blame the person or group causing discomfort or conflict, rather than addressing the issues being named. Another way to look at it is that some people get more upset about hearing that slavery was horrible than they do about the fact that it was horrible, about the fact that millions of lives were destroyed. The poem we heard earlier, so beautifully read by Perry, was called Anger by Lynn Unger, and it captures what can happen to those whose comfort is taken away. The world is not what you were promised, and you are being asked to care about suffering and danger that could break your heart if you let it in. Many people don't let it in, and they get angry instead. In a complicated way, all this reminds me of a song from the musical The Wiz, the famous African-American version of the Wizard of Oz story. In The Wiz, the Wicked Witch of the West character oversees a sweatshop, and she serves as a metaphor for slavery. And this witch, named Eveline, sings a lively song called "Don't Nobody Bring Me No Bad News." In the lyrics, she wakes up each day already negative, she says, so she doesn't need any more negative information. And if you want to be her buddy, those are the rules. She even says she'll make you an offer you can't refuse if you bring her bad news. She threatens those who would tell her the truth. She's a cartoonish character in the movie, but there are all kinds of real-life Americans with the same attitude and making similar threats. These are the people who do not want facts or historical narratives that might cause them to feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress. Unfortunately, proponents of white supremacy and authoritarianism find that there is much to gain politically by stirring up these sentiments. It worked in 1994, right before that year's midterm elections. A well-respected set of new federal education standards became a political football right around that time. It scared white parents around the country, and white people voting out of fear vote to the right. The same strategy is working right now at the local and state level with manufactured controversies about how racial history is taught and about the freedom to go without a mask. But as we know from COVID-19, bad news doesn't go away when you deny the facts. In fact, the opposite happens, and the crisis is magnified. History and facts are clearly suffering in the public square. Fortunately, the degree of suffering varies from square to square, and there's actually some good news these days if you look around. First, here in Minnesota, and actually in lots of areas, extremist, anti-science, anti-literature, anti-learning about race candidates pretty much lost their efforts to take over school boards. We've had contentious public meetings and a record number of elected officials resigning or not running again, but fact-based candidates largely prevailed. This is definitely worth celebrating, but at the same time, those of us with level-headed school boards should not get too comfortable, because a lot of the shenanigans we see around the country happens at the state level. The state level is where that horrible Virginia textbook came from, and it's state legislatures that are passing those laws that ban teachers from talking about anything that might cause discomfort or distress. So if you are happy with how your school district approaches history and race, and if you don't want to see your local officials overruled by legislators from around the state, you will want to pay close attention to next year's elections and support candidates who share your values. Local officials who are bravely doing the right thing are just some of the people doing good work these days. Recently, I found myself inspired by the story of someone who I wouldn't even have imagined that they existed. The inspiration came from a Wired magazine article about a Wikipedia editor. No one will ever make a blockbuster movie about a Wikipedia editor, but this person is a hero nonetheless. As you may know, Wikipedia is an enormous online encyclopedia that is written and edited mainly by volunteers. And until I read the Wired article, I didn't know that people sympathetic to Nazis have been going into Wikipedia and influencing some of the pages about World War II. They were inserting phrases that glorified Nazi officers and minimized some of the horrors they committed. And these editors were doing so by citing questionable sources for the footnotes, or offering just pure hearsay. Enter Ksenia Kaufman, who grew up in Soviet-era Russia. Kaufman has little patience for disinformation given her background, and so she has worked since 2015 to scrub rubbish from Wikipedia. In the past several years, she has made 97,000 edits. They keep track of every single edit. And she's created more than 3,000 new pages to provide accurate information. She currently keeps watch over 2,000 articles. She gets a notification every time someone makes a change so she can check it out and make sure there isn't backsliding. Like those school board members holding the line, Kaufman could literally be doing anything else with her free time, but she's choosing to take care of history and the truth. And historians of all kinds can continue to do an incredible job of broadening the stories we hear. This work of expanding the narratives beyond the conquests and political acts of white male leaders first blossomed in the 1960s with the rise of African American history and women's history. And these large-scale expansions of the narrative continue in journalism and academia. You may have heard of a newly published book called The Dawn of Nearly Everything, A New History of Humanity, by David Graeber and David Wengrow. The authors challenge the normally accepted timeline of human history, that we went from hunter-gatherers to agricultural people to hierarchical city-states. They argue that things were not nearly so linear, and that humans were not merely carried along by technological and ecological trends. But rather, they say that people made all kinds of choices about how to organize their societies. We do not have time this morning for me to read you the book's 700 pages, which seem like a very likely candidate for our next big read book club. But I want to briefly share a couple of narratives. One is about Cahokia, the once great city that existed not far from where St. Louis is today. I've mentioned Cahokia before, and I actually finally got there about 3 weeks ago. Cahokia was a prosperous but authoritarian society that existed for about 300 years before abruptly collapsing in the 1300s. Various theories for its demise have included a shift in climate, or that the people there had poor agricultural practices. But the authors of the book float an entirely different reason. Maybe people left because they didn't like it. Maybe they didn't like living under tyranny and decided to ease on down the road. It's amazing, when you think about it, how we dehumanize our long-ago ancestors into passive creatures when they were fully capable of making choices, just like us. Right now, the population of the city of St. Louis is 1/3 of what it was in 1950. If modern people can pick up and relocate because they wish to live differently, why wouldn't earlier humans do the same? A second narrative from the book is an even bigger upending. So many of us were raised on the idea that Europeans came to this continent to civilize the people who were already living here. Again, another dehumanizing viewpoint. But Graeber, an anthropologist, and Wengrow, an archaeologist, describe a well-researched opposite scenario. It turns out that a group of indigenous people in eastern North America became highly critical when they learned about European civilization. They found it overly competitive, cruel, dogmatic, irrational, oppressive, and rife with inequality. This sounds a little bit like the culture we live in today, but this was centuries ago, and they found documents with these viewpoints in them. The book's authors make the case that when the indigenous critique made its way back to France, and it was shared among the intellectual class, it began to cause significant self-reflection on European values. And this examination helped bring about the Enlightenment. There are, of course, people who would find this account distressing, as it elevates indigenous people and does not help the reputation of white European colonists. To those who are distressed, I might recommend the quiet comfort of a pillow fort. For the rest of us, I close with this thought from Ksenia Kaufman, the Wikipedia editor. The work she is doing is time-consuming, it involves conflict, and it's never-ending. But Kaufman doesn't view the protection of history as a battle. In fact, she steers clear of all war metaphors. She instead thinks of history as real estate. You have to have a security system, she says. You have to maintain your house. And human history is a house with room enough for everyone's story.
I have already gotten some bad news. It is that this microphone over here close to the piano doesn't work for the people online. Y'all told me some bad news. Let's see if this works a little better. All right, let's do it. When I wake up in the afternoon, which it pleases me to do, don't nobody bring me no bad news, 'cause I wake up already negative and I've wired up my fuse. Don't nobody bring me no bad news. If we're gonna be buddies, well, you better bone up on the rules. Don't nobody bring me no bad news. We can be the best of friends, but you're gonna pay your dues. Don't nobody bring me no bad news, no bad news, no bad news. Don't nobody bring me no bad news, 'cause I make you an offer, child, that you cannot refuse. Don't nobody bring me no bad news. Now when you're talking to me, don't be crying blues. Don't you ever bring me no bad news. You can verbalize and vocalize, but just bring me the clues. Don't nobody bring me no bad news. You can bring some message in your head or something you can't lose, but don't you ever bring me no bad news, no bad news. If you're gonna bring me something, child, bring me something I can use. Don't you ever bring me no bad news, no bad news, no bad news, no bad news. Don't you ever bring me no bad news, 'cause I make you an offer, child, that you cannot refuse. Don't you ever bring me no bad news. Don't you ever bring me no bad news.
Thank you so much, Rev. Kelly. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. All of these we carry in our hearts and in our minds until we are together again. Thank you, Perry. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. A reminder that we will not be having an online coffee hour today, but do remember that you can still order those cinnamon rolls, and if you're at home, run on by and pick them up. I'll leave you with a thought from a marvelous book titled Undrowned: Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, Gumbs. She writes this: What do we need to remember that will push back against the forgetting, encouraged by consumer culture and linear time? What can we remember that will surround us in the oceans of history and potential? And how will we do it? So may it be.